Thank you very much. I'm going to start with a greeting to you in India from here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And this is in our Indigenous language, which is called Māori. You may have heard of it. So, ko puke tāpapa te maunga, ko ungawa te awa no tāmaki me kaurau ahau. Ko Michael toku whae ipo, ko Bella taku tamahine, ko Jessie taku tama, ko Julia Grace toku ingoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I have just said to you that I bring you greetings, not from Australia, but very close by. I'm actually a New Zealander, I'm a Kiwi, and I'm here in New Zealand in the city of Auckland. Is there anybody here, maybe you could pop in the chat if you have ever visited New Zealand, or if you have family or friends who live in New Zealand. I know we have a large and flourishing Indian community, not only just in Auckland and New Zealand, but actually right here in the area that I live in. I'd love to hear if you visited us, if you would ever like to, you would be so welcome. I have also mentioned that my husband's name is Michael. He is in the next room. I'm in my home here today, and I've got him on text. If I need anything, I'll be making sure he will come and assist me in my office. And I also have two beautiful children. My daughter's name is Bella, and my son's name is Jesse. And I gave you greetings once, twice, and 3 times from Julia Grace. I will start by saying I am a little unwell at the moment, so it's great that I'm in amongst so many doctors. I have a bit of a cold, and so my voice is quite crackly and croaky. I'm going to do my best to communicate clearly with you today, and I hope that you will forgive me if I'm a little bit croaky as we go along. So,
Your voice is perfect, Julia. It's perfect.
Oh, thank you. I hope it doesn't get worse, but we will see. Hopefully we'll be fine. My credentials are with me on the wall from 2 parts of my world. Up on my right hand side, you'll see I'm an award-winning singer-songwriter and recording artist. I've actually recorded 4 studio albums and released those. You can see a couple of them there. On the other side of me, I have my academic qualifications. I'm a school teacher. I was a school teacher for 30 years of children in what we call our primary school sector. So these are our younger or junior school children up until the age of around 13. I'm also the president of the Professional Speakers Association in New Zealand. And I am what else have we got up here? I'm a mental health first aid instructor as well as an author. So I bring to this topic 3 very important strands. One is my desire to teach. The teacher in me is always looking for ways to take difficult concepts and complex information and turn them into fun, more easy to understand concepts. And so I do a lot of reading of the clinical texts, and I turn them into much more fun activities so that other people can use that language to speak about their mental health, not just with their colleagues, but also with their children and maybe their grandchildren and maybe their elderly parents. So everybody can talk about mental health. The second strand that I bring to the table is the entertainment, and I love to sing and speak, and I will sing a couple of songs for you later on if that is okay. And then of course that third one, as already mentioned, is that completely important strand of the lived experience. I deal with depression and anxiety, and so for me, the work that I teach in Being Kind to Your Mind is not just theory. It's things that work, it's things that function, and it's things that I actually use in my everyday life to help me to be kind to my mind and also to be kind to the mind of others. So that's a little bit about me. I have a lot of people saying to me often, what's the problem with mental health? Why are we having so many issues with our mental health at the moment in this more modern society? And of course, as all of you would know, I'm in amongst extremely esteemed colleagues here. As all of you would know, this is a deeply complex question to which there is no simple answer. But there's a few things that I like to say when we get into this conversation. And one of them is actually to do with what we now have to deal with in our everyday life. So I'm just going to pop onto the screen here a little bit of a laugh. Now, I'm going to guess from the fact that I have so many doctors that many of you would remember the 1980s. Would I be correct? Give me a little thumbs up or a heart on your screen if you remember the 80s. I spoke at a large corporation organization called Booking.com the other day, and I stood up and I said to them, who remembers the 1980s? Because this is just something that I say commonly. And the whole room just looked at me with blank faces and blank looks, and not one of them was born before 1991. And I realized that my audience were not with me in that moment. They were very, very young. They're all in their 30s, 20s and 30s. But I'm going to guess that many of us do remember. And on the screen, you will see, of course, the wonderful Rubik's Cube. In the 1980s, we had this invention of the Rubik's Cube where we tried to solve this puzzle, and it seemed like a really complicated and difficult one, but of course it was quite doable. But I've compared what we deal with in 1980 to perhaps what we and our young people are dealing with today in 2023, even 2024. And I don't know about you, but it feels like the complexity of our world has increased and increased, and it's starting to feel a bit like that large Rubik's Cube there. Now, this doesn't mean that we didn't have anything to worry about in the 1980s. I don't know about you, but I used to worry a lot about whether I could find my favorite fluorescent green socks or my cool my cool fluorescent outfits that I wore in the 80s with my cool spiky hair. But there was a lot going on in the world that we did not know about. And of course, now in the 21st century, we are barraged with information and overloaded. And I want to speak particularly on behalf of our young people now, in that they are being barraged with information each and every day. And it's not always positive. In fact, most of it is doom, gloom, and negativity. So one of the challenges that I give to people is when it comes to how much information is coming into our life is to actually take control and take charge. And today I'm going to start with a challenge to you that if you are feeling under pressure, if you're feeling overwhelmed at any point, to consider how much information you are allowing into your world via the internet, via YouTube, social media, news sources, and those sort of things, because they are extremely overwhelming when we have a lot going on. So there's a lot happening. And so for me, I really feel like that stress has increased and perhaps will continue to increase as we move forward. But I'm working really hard to try and make sure that people have better tools to deal with that as they go. For myself, I came into this mental health world a little later in life. I turned 40 years old about 12 years ago. I'm 52 now. And when I turned 40, I found myself propelled into a period of time of big personal stress. I was all of a sudden, I had been married for 17 years to my childhood sweetheart, had a beautiful home, beautiful family, and a very structured life. And in one conversation, my husband decided that he no longer wanted to be married to me, and he left. And I found myself in a situation where I was dealing with heartbreak, with absolute chaos around me. And it was a period of time that I was deeply unprepared for. As that time started to drag along, I noticed that bad days were starting to turn into bad weeks, and bad weeks were turning into bad months. And eventually, I was struggling to deal with my mental health or well-being at all. What it felt like for me was a beige feeling, that color of beige, like the color on the wall, where the colorful, vibrant part of me that would normally be alive and awake had started to feel like it just wasn't there. Now, if you know anything about me, and you will have probably seen on my clothing, you see on my color and my books, I am a bright and colorful person. And so for me to feel beige and colorless was really unusual. And one of the things I really encourage people to look for as signs for mental distress is changes. If I was not a bright, bubbly person and suddenly I was finding myself kind of a little quiet, a little withdrawn, that would not be unusual. But for me, it was the sign of a problem. I talk to people about keeping an eye out for their friends, and they say, "What am I looking for?" And I say, "You're looking for things that are different, for them to be responding in ways that are not their normal self." One of the things that I do when I'm under mental pressure, if I'm in a bit of a depressive dive or an anxiety spike, is I call it ghosting. I ghost people. And that means I will not respond to messages or emails. I'll start to say no in situations where I would normally say yes. If you were inviting me out for a meal or wanting to spend time with me, normally I'd say that would be a great idea. But when I'm under mental pressure and mental distress, I will say, no, no, I don't feel like that today. So watching out for those things where people are changing. If you could imagine in my world a little meter of stress, a stress meter, it was just going up and up and up and up. And I began to deal with panic attacks, and I began to deal with spirals of anxiety. And then eventually, as I said, with that clinical depression, where my mood was so low that I really needed some professional help. And I needed to go to the doctor and deal with that, as well as many other tools in my toolbox. I'm going to be very honest with you today, as I am always very transparent about my journey. And I'll tell you, this has been a deeply humbling experience. I like to say my life is like a long series of getting knocked off my high horse and getting back on progressively smaller horses. And right now, I'm saddling up a Chihuahua, as I'm just honest and just speak freely about what's going on. So that's a little bit about me, way down here in New Zealand. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about you, where you are in India. So I'm going to pop onto the screen here what I call my Chihuahua check-in, because I love to know how you guys are feeling today. I'm going to ask Dr. Sandeep to help me out here because he might be reading the chat. And I'm going to ask you to have a look at the screen and perhaps pop into the chat there. Which Chihuahua are you today? How are you feeling? What are you bringing to the table? Happy, a little bit not
Dr.
sure.
Gagan is saying one happy,
There's 4 there.
one.
Can you,
4 is not
yeah.
here.
Can you see 4 Chihuahuas?
No.
Oh, what can you see? Okay, nothing
Manju
there.
1. Anju Aurora is also saying.
Okay, we won't worry. Okay, so we can't see it. Technical difficulties with the Chihuahua.
So Dr. GK is saying 1.
We can only
You
see
know,
number 1. Oh, I see. Okay, we can only see number 1. Never mind. Well, we've got a happy one. We've got a bit of a confused one. Maybe I'm feeling a bit of a confused one because my slides aren't quite doing. I can see 4, so obviously a little lost in translation. My apologies there. Thank you for your patience.
slides are amazing. Julius, all slides are really amazing.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. So let's talk a little bit about why I am here. And I'm going to give some statistics that are related to mental health statistics in New Zealand. And I'd be really interested to chat with you later on, perhaps as to what your statistics are, or you could even put it into the chat, what your statistics are around mental health in India or where you're from, because I know we have a global experience, but we also have differences perhaps in culture. So according to our Mental Health Foundation in New Zealand, who is our largest organisation based around mental health, 1 in 2 New Zealanders would meet the criteria of a mental health diagnosis at some stage in their lifetime. So that does not mean that they will get a diagnosis, but it means they will have gone through a period of time where they could be ticked off and they may be diagnosed in that situation. More of a day-to-day statistic tells us that at any given time, 1 in 6 New Zealanders will be feeling the physical symptoms of a mental health challenge at any given time. So when it comes to our young people, we're probably talking more like 1 in 4 or maybe 1 in 3. So with that, maybe if you give me a bit of a thumbs up, I think, thank you so much. I can see a gentleman's comes up where we have similar statistics, that in each group of people, we would have somebody in there who would be feeling that at that time. And I know it's really brought to the fore and understanding that this is happening everywhere and this could be happening to anybody at any time. So I have a strong belief that mental health issues are RUM. So now I know that spells rum. It makes it easy for me to remember, but they are RUM, and I'm going to explain them to you. First of all, reasonable. So the first one is that mental health challenges are reasonable. They are a reasonable response of the body to the pressures of life. And one of the things I love to say to people when they're under pressure, they will often come and tell me stories. After I've spoken at a conference or a large event, people love to come and tell me stories. And I'm sure every one of you would have people who come and tell you their stories. I can see some people nodding. People often say, I feel so stressed, I feel anxious, and they tell me all of the stress and pressure they're under. And then they say, I don't understand it. And I say, I do. I understand it based on what you have told me. One of my favorite sayings is, it makes sense to me that given what you're dealing with, you would be feeling anxious or feeling overwhelmed. So first of all, understanding that it's a reasonable response of the body to the pressures of life. So what do I mean by that? Well, breaking your ankle is a reasonable response of the body to falling down the stairs. None of us would be, we'd be upset, but we wouldn't be shocked and horrified if somebody fell over and broke their ankle. What's another one? Morning sickness is a reasonable response of the body to pregnancy. If someone is pregnant and they're dealing with morning sickness, we're not all weird about it. We completely understand that it's a very reasonable response of the body. Not a pleasant response, but perfectly reasonable. And so I firmly believe that under the pressure that we're in, it's a reasonable response of the body to respond in a way where it's not always going to do what we're expecting it to do. Secondly, universal. So understanding that we are all on a wellness spectrum. I really believe that mental health challenges are a spectrum-based situation whereby we all sit on that spectrum somewhere, and we could be there at some stage in our life. That spectrum could go all the way through to a life-altering diagnosis, right back through just to some pressure, just dealing with a little bit of feeling a bit under the weather or feeling a bit overwhelmed. And we're all going to sit on that spectrum somewhere. I find in my work, by being very clear about this to people, it helps to take the stigma away. Because I don't know about your society, but we're brought up with a very strong feeling that mental health issues happen to a certain group of people. And it was kind of those over there. And so what it meant was that when people who were not expecting to deal with mental health challenges began to feel those symptoms, they would feel embarrassed, would feel ashamed. A little story, which is not a pleasant story, but I spoke once in a rural area of New Zealand, and I gave a mental health event, put them on, and a lady came up to me and she said, why didn't you do it in this other area? Because there's more of those people over there. I was quite shocked. I was like, oh, wow, that was a bit of a tough comment, but I understand what she's saying, but there was this very strong sense that mental health only happens to a certain group of people. And so we unpacked that conversation, and I really encourage people to understand that anybody and everybody can deal with mental health challenges at some stage in their lifetime, and there is no shame and no embarrassment in needing to get help for that. So we've got reasonable, they make sense. Universal, we're all on the spectrum. And finally, manageable. Great news, there are heaps of tools in the toolbox. One of my favorite things to do is actually to speak to children in school. I speak to the high school students a lot. And I love to get up on the big stages and the spotlights and the fun of those events, and remind those girls and boys, particularly the girls, that if they deal with mental health challenges at some stage in their lifetime, they are just like me, and it's not going to stop them from doing amazing things. So if you or someone you love is dealing with mental health challenges at the moment, that does not put you out of the running for a wonderful, wonderful life. So I want to be really positive and really encouraging about that today, just to make sure we're being really kind to our own mind. So reasonable, universal, and of course, finally, great news, manageable. Now I want to do a little activity, and I'm going to ask some stories. I'm going to tell you a little story, and if you have ever experienced this particular phenomenon, I'm going to ask you to either put a thumbs up or maybe pop in the chat, or simply you can just nod away at home to yourself. All right, so here we go. You don't need a slide for this one. I'm just going to tell you about it. Now I call this put a finger down, because I'm going to put my fingers down as we go, but you can just nod along. Put a finger down if you have ever got tired from cognitive thought. So you've been doing something that's really, really busy, and you've felt like you didn't do anything physical, but you did a lot of thinking and you felt quite tired. Now, a lot of us feel this way because our brain uses so much energy. So you can save some energy by putting your hand down while I explain a little bit about that as we go. I'm just going to pop down to the slide there. First of all, is that your brain is an energy hungry monster. Now, this is probably not news to any of you because you're all doctors, but I'm just putting it in a simple, easy to understand way. Your brain is 2% of your body weight and uses 20% of your energy, up to 40% under heavy cognitive load. And so because of that, it loves a shortcut. It's always looking for a shortcut. What do we need to know from this? We need to understand that when we've got a lot to think about, we often get really tired, and that's okay. We need to take a break. All right, secondly, put a finger down if you've ever forgotten somebody's name and then remembered it at a really unusual time, like the middle of the night. I can see some people nodding. You know, that moment where you go to sleep and suddenly you think, oh, whatever it was that I've been thinking about all day has suddenly come back to me, and we are back in the room. I love that concept. Your brain wants a solution. It hates not knowing what's going on. I've popped up on the screen there a little Rubik's Cube as well, because when we say, I'm going to put it out of my mind, we can't. We put it out of our conscious mind, but it goes into our subconscious, and our brain is in the background there trying to come up with a solution. So I think this also answers a little bit of that question at the beginning of why we're all under a lot of stress. There are a lot of things in the world right now that have no particular solution. There are things happening on the world global scale as we are speaking here today in the Middle East that are confusing, that are confronting, that are going on. And no matter how much we focus on what's in front of us, our brain is in the background going, how do we make sense of all of this? We have had half a decade of things that don't make a lot of sense, and a world that has been arguing and fighting against itself. And so it is no wonder that we are tired. It is no wonder that our young people are feeling overwhelmed with what is going on. Your brain is looking for a solution. Now, unfortunately, as you guys probably are very aware, if it can't find a solution, guess what it does? It makes something up. This is where weird conspiracy theories come in. This is where strange ideas come in, where brains that cannot sit with not knowing will start to make sense of something in a strange way that doesn't make sense. And I know last week we had an eclipse, and a certain portion of the world coming up with weird ideas as to why that was happening. Simply something happening in the sky becomes a weird thing. And so our brains get really busy. All right. Put a finger down if you've ever struggled to sleep, but you've also been really tired. So you've been wanting to get to sleep, but you've struggled to get to sleep. Yeah. And that's such a common occurrence, particularly in our modern world. I call this tired but wired, where our brain is busy, our body's exhausted, or our brain's exhausted and our body feels all twitchy and busy. And understanding that needing to get that sleep is so important for our mental health and well-being. Put a finger down if you've ever walked into a room and completely forgot why you were there. I can see some hands going down. Yeah. Now, we walk in. Of course, what do we do? No matter where we are in the world, we have the same solution. We walk out of the room, and then we walk back in, and we try and trick the universe into thinking that we never went in there in the first place. Yeah. You know what? It doesn't work, but sometimes it does work. I love the fact that we think that we can be more clever than our own brains, and yet we give it a go. All right, put a finger down if you've ever got stuck on some negative feedback. You've had a comment made to you that was challenging at work or at school or at home. Yeah, I can see some hands going down there too. What this means is that our brain prioritizes our safety. So I've got there on the screen, it loves a shortcut, it definitely wants a solution, and it prioritizes our safety above all else. One of the things that I find people talk about, particularly with young people, is they say, why can't they just think positive? Why do you just mind a matter, just think positive, just think nice things and move on? And while I completely understand the concept, we also need to understand that our brains just aren't wired to go around looking for positive things when we are feeling like we're in danger. So we have a little term for this here. I don't know if you guys use this. We call this ants, which is our automatic negative thoughts. That's our negative bias, where our brain just has that negative bias. And sometimes we need to stop and think, is that me or is that just the ants? Are they just climbing around in my brain? I'm going to give you some statistics on this, which I'm sure you know. Research tells us 60,000 to 120,000 thoughts every day, of which 80% are negative and 95% are repeated from yesterday. Your brain scans the room every 6 seconds for your safety. So it's not that easy just to think positively. Now, what does this mean in our everyday life? What it means is we need to overdose positivity, particularly if you are dealing with young people in your world. Now, we all get stuck on the negative. We all get stuck on the things that make our hearts break and get stuck, because those are the things that make us feel like we may not be completely safe. I'm going to tell you a little story. It's not the most pleasant of stories, but it was a very interesting one that happened to me when I was releasing. Actually, this album here is called Beautiful Survivor. And I released this album and we put it out for review. Now, I don't know if any of you have put work out for review. I'm sure many of you will have put out your scientific work, maybe also creative work for review. It's a scary process when you finish your work and you hand it over and somebody gets to read it or listen or watch, and then they get to tell you what they think. So that is quite a vulnerable place to be. Would you agree? So my album went out and I got incredible feedback. In fact, I won a TUI award. I won a New Zealand Music Award. And so I got amazing feedback from that song and from that album. But I was in Australia and I was starting to get reviews coming in, and I was in a hotel on my own on tour. So already I'm away from home. I'm on my own. I'm touring. I'm probably tired. I'm probably jet lagged. And I open up my laptop and I start to read reviews. Now, some of you can see where the story is going. I got a whole lot of great reviews and then one really, really bad one. And a girl was asked to review my album who should never have been asked to review. She did not like, she was not in my demographic. She was not in my age range. She would have disliked everything I stood for. And so she was not the right person to ask, but I didn't ask her, somebody else did. And she wrote a review that said this: Julia Grace sings like a preschool teacher. Now it gets worse, so you can feel sorry for me in a minute. There was a song on the album called Open Window, and she said the song Open Window was the only song of the album that didn't make me want to throw myself out of one. Now I laugh now, and that was actually a great story because I can tell you now many years later, but can you imagine what I felt at the time? I was bawling my eyes out, I was crying, I felt terrible, I was calling home going and it was amazing how so much positive feedback was completely washed out by this one piece of negative feedback,
How
because your
many
brain,
positive are there, Julia, and how many negative?
Oh, hundreds of positive. Yeah, but one real shocking negative. But isn't it amazing how our brains get stuck on that one? I want you to
Exactly.
think about a situation where you've had that negative feedback, and it doesn't matter how many positive, the negative gets really stuck. Now, our conscious brain says, "Don't be stupid. You do amazing work. What you bring to the table, your scientific work, your medical work, your heart, your life is wonderful." But that stuff gets stuck. I call them sticky words. And they get stuck in our hearts because our brain is thinking, uh-oh, if everybody thinks this, maybe my job is going to be, my job is at stake or something. So I want to use that story to remind you to be really, really positive, particularly if you're dealing with young people in your world. And if you need to communicate with them, use what I call a spicy sandwich. Now, what's a spicy sandwich? A spicy sandwich means that in the middle of the conversation, you may need to have some robust talk. This doesn't mean that you can't speak plainly. This doesn't mean that you can't tell somebody off, ask them to do better, get them to work harder, do their work. But what is that we need to make sure that we use some encouragement first, then we have the spicy conversation, and then we finish with some encouragement. And the more vulnerable that person is, the bigger the sandwich needs to be on either side. So I'm not saying you can't have the strong conversation. I am saying it's a great idea to couch it so that they come into that difficult bit feeling a little bit more robust. They get a dopamine hit from that encouragement that you gave them, and then they are prepared to have that next part of the conversation. So, one of our big challenges is actually around mental health and how to talk about it. What you may have noticed from what I've presented to you so far is I use a lot of fun words, and I call these grabbable words. I've talked about a spicy sandwich, I've talked about the brain being an energy hungry monster, and I actually love to use these words because they make it much more easy to talk to people about their mental health. Talking in clinical language can be scary and it can be overwhelming. If we can talk in a bit more fun language, we can make the whole process a bit more easy. So I want to introduce some of my grabbable words to you today. And the first one there is that we love to recognize the wobbly point. Now, what do I mean by the wobbly point? The wobbly point, the point at which your body is telling you that if something doesn't change, you're going to end up with a mental health challenge. So it's those feelings of overwhelming stress response, those feelings where things are not going well, and understanding that if we introduce the language of the wobbly point, you can tell me that you're feeling a bit wobbly. And if you can't even say it, just enter the room with a wobbly wave and I'll get the picture just to let me know that I don't know. Yep, I can see some wobbly waves going on there. I don't know what's wrong, but we know that something's not right. The great thing about the language of the wobbly point is it's fun. It takes the sting out of the tail. I don't need to know what your mum said to you when you were 7, what you had for dinner last night. I don't have a counselling session. All I know is that I'm going to treat you with a little more care and and talk about the wobbly point. That's why I use the jelly, because jellies are designed to wobble. I use it on the book. You can see my jellies there. Jellies are made to wobble, and we want to grab them before they break. We want to notice when they're wobbling, and we can use that. I actually challenge people to make jelly. I don't know if you call it jelly or jello in India, but to make a jelly and to sit down with your family and have that for dessert and talk about how would you want to be treated when you have reached your wobbly point. So that's the first one there. The wobbly point, obviously, as we'll all know about these, but these are our stress responses, and understanding that those are the feelings that we get when we're under pressure, and they can actually make that wobbly point feel much, much worse. The next one that I love to use is to get yourself a jelly buddy. Now, once again, fun language takes the sting out of the tail. What do I mean by a jelly buddy? I actually make these little cards, and I'll hold that up for you to see. And it literally says, "Hey, jelly buddy." It's
Actually,
giving a
this is
person.
Julia. This is a mirror image, so we can't see it clearly.
Okay, sorry, I will read it to you. Thank you. It says, yep, yep, yep. No, it doesn't. It says, hey, Jelly Buddy. What these are conversation starters. And you're asking someone that you already know and love and saying, will you be my Jelly Buddy? So you sit down with them on a good, solid, strong day and you say, I give you permission to check in, to hang out, and if need be, to get help. These are the people who will not just allow me to say, no, thanks, I don't want to hang out with you. These are the people who will push beyond that and come into my world and recognize that I may have reached my wobbly point, even though I don't necessarily know it. Because that's one of the challenges of mental health, right? We can't see what's going on. I say to my jelly buddies, you can turn up at my house at any time. And if I don't answer the door, break a window. And if the police turn up, just show them a Jelly Buddy card. I guarantee this will stand up in a court of law. I do not guarantee this will stand up in a court of law, by the way. But I love the idea that you have given them permission on the good days to be there for you already on the tough days, because on the tough day it's too late. Stressed out brains are offline brains and they're not going to be making that decision on a difficult day. And the final one of these is what I call the 1 degree of change. These are the tiny little changes that we make around our well-being to move in the right direction. Often we end up feeling like we've got to make massive changes. We've got to do big things in our world and our well-being. But actually it's the small sustainable changes that make the big difference. And I've put on here a bunch of words that I use, and they all start with with an F, because they help me to remember what's going on in my world. I make sure I have those family and friends, the Jelly Buddy around me, those people who I am honest with and I speak to clearly. I've got there for I've got therapy. Now, I don't know if this is quite translating well, but that's my version of therapy. I've just made them all start with an F to make it easier to remember. I love my therapists, counselors, our psychologists, psychiatrists, those people who can sit and who can spend time, can be with us and sit with us and hold space with us when we are needing our different. Now, these could be alternative therapists, they could be mainstream therapists, whatever works for you, having those people in your world. The next one I've got there is fullness. And our fullness is the fun and the things that we love to do. The definition of depression is a dip. And if you imagine a big blow up beach ball with a dip in it, if we try and suck that dip out, it's just going to keep appearing somewhere else. So understanding that we need to do some things that actually make us come alive, not what you have to do, not what you need to do, but simply what you want to do. And the next one on that list is faith. Our faith practices. Now, these can be simple as mindfulness or meditative practices. They could be religious practices, or they could be just simply taking off your shoes and walking on the grass or walking in the water and feeling the earth under your feet. A bunch of ideas there. We've got fitness and food, moving our bodies, as I'm sure you guys all are very well aware, is just so great for our mental health, so great for our well-being, and understanding that we need to use the endorphins and get those dopamine hits from getting out there and exercising and filling our bodies with nutritious and delicious food. I've got the pharmaceuticals, and I don't give a prescription on what that needs to look like for you, but I'm very grateful for the medical professionals, very grateful for the doctors who have helped me in my mental health journey. And for those who have needed to go to the doctor, I always encourage them to go and seek medical assistance and medical help at that time. And of course, finally, we've got our forward focus. We've got something for you to look forward to regardless high. So I want to finish my part of this evening, just keeping a little eye on the time there, with a song. And I would love to share a song that I did. I was speaking in Delhi a few weeks ago, actually. I was speaking at the Professional Speakers Association. And I talked about my journey during that difficult time when my marriage was breaking down and my family was really falling apart around me. I did what we often do as adults, is that we hold it together for everybody else. I'm really aware that in a group of this size with screen and another couple of screens that I can't even see, there will be people who will be dealing with some personal challenges. And I just want to encourage you that no matter what's going on in your world, the only way out of a deep, dark pit is one little step at a time. I feel you, I see you, my heart is with you. And I remember at that time, I would hold it together for others. I would hold it together for my clients, for my students. I'd hold it together for the people in the shops and my family and my in-laws and my children, in fact. And I would hold it together for everybody else. And then I'd come home to my home. And at night, I would come back to the kitchen. And it wasn't that the kitchen was a very special place. It was simply that there were a lot of doors between my children's rooms and the kitchen. And in that kitchen, I would lie, land, collapse onto the concrete floor. And there I would just cry and sob and scream as I tried to make sense of what was going on in my world to see that I may have a continued future. And it wasn't nice crying like the movies, you know, it was dirty crying, snot flying, mascara running, strange yodeling noises. Because when you're really, really, really at the end of yourself, you just don't care anymore. And I remember just thinking, how do I come back from this? How do I come back from depression, from divorce, from disappointment, and from debt? And I want to encourage you today that my life from 10, 11, 12 years on is almost completely unrecognizable from what it was, but it's beautiful in its own way. I have a different topic. I have the same career, but it's changed, it's morphed, and it's moved. And the things that I've gone through have become the things that have taught me so much about my journey in the long run. So this is a song. If I could talk to that girl lying on the kitchen floor and have a conversation with her from now, this is what I would say. This is the girl on the kitchen floor. This song is for the girl on the kitchen floor. I'm so grateful that I'm not her anymore, but I never will forget how she cried there on the concrete every night. This song is for the girl who had given up hope, who had watched her dreams and promises go up in smoke as she faced the bitter knowledge there was no more comfort inside. I want to tell that girl that life will be beautiful again. I want to tell that girl that her days will be full of love again. And I've got miles and miles to go, but in my heart of hearts I know there is so much left to live for. Girl on the kitchen floor. This song is for the hearts who were shattered and torn, who are living in the darkest hour just before the dawn. Hold on, there's better days are coming, and I want to tell that girl that life will be beautiful again. I want to tell that girl that her days will be full of love again. And I've got miles and miles to go, but in my heart of hearts I know there is so much left to live for. Girl on the kitchen floor. Thank you so
Beautiful,
much.
mesmerizing.
Thank you. I was going to just add, and I'll pop onto the screen. My book is available as an ebook. It's also on Amazon, but the that song is in the book. I've put eight of my favorite songs throughout the story. The book is around my journey, but it's a workbook, a very, very practical workbook using fun, easy to understand language. It can be done by all ages, and it includes the music as well. So thank you so much for listening to my story and for participating in the session. And I'll hand back to you. Thank you so much.